of our conflicts have tended to be military actions or vaguely defined police activities. Our gradual acceptance of this shift from formally declared war to war at the president's discretion makes it all too easy to make war without anyone really being accountable. It also makes possible what we have now, war without end. When do Democrats and Republicans join hands and actually agree? When much needed and long overdue military cuts impact their districts. Our Freedom Fighters panel is on that. Charlie Gasparino, Carolyn Heldman, Gerald Celente, here next. Politicians on both sides of the aisle are suddenly preaching fiscal responsibility. But when Secretary of Defense Robert Gates recommended this week common sense cuts in the Pentagon's budget that would jeopardize some jobs in Virginia, he got an earful from that state's, quote, Republican governor and from both of its, quote, Democratic senators. Reasons for the quote in a moment. As long as our elected officials only worry about votes rather than fiscal responsibility, do we have any hope of fixing this financial mess? To our freedom fighters, my friend and Fox Business colleague, senior correspondent Charlie Gasparino, Occidental College political scientist Carolyn Heldman, and trends analyst Gerald Celente. Charlie, to you first. Does it make any difference that the Defense Department wants to cut 2% of its budget? We know they howl in Virginia because that's where the jobs are. But big picture, from the economy, will it mean anything?
I don't think you should be cutting defense spending right now. I have a real problem with destimulating the economy in this period. I'm not saying we should go out and spend money like drunken sailors, but I think there's right now, destimulating the economy while we have 9.5% unemployment.
If the government took in less money and let you and Carolyn and Jerry and everybody that's watching us have more money in their pockets to spend as they want, that would stimulate the economy.
I agree, but I'm not in favor of basically slowing down the economy at this point.
Carolyn, should the Defense Department budget be cut by 2%?
Yes, Judge. I think this is where liberals and libertarians will come together. You know, Dwight Eisenhower, over 50 years ago, warned us about the expansion of the military-industrial complex, this massive self-perpetuating behemoth. And if we can't get this defense spending under control, we can't get the deficit under control.
Do you want defense spending under control, Carolyn, because you think the military-industrial complex is too big, too strong, and a threat to our liberties, or for economic reasons?
For both, Judge. Under the last administration, President Bush did increase discretionary spending 48%, much of that military spending. And I think that we could be a lot, well, we're in two wars that we shouldn't be in.
All right, good point.
We're in two wars we shouldn't be in.
Jerry, does it make any difference, 2% in a budget that's $600 billion?
2%'s chump change. What are we looking at, $20 billion a year? $20 billion a year, and we're looking at a defense budget when you have defense-related spending off the defense budget. We're talking, Judge, $1 trillion a year. I'm of the belief that that money has to come back. This is corporate welfare. When you look at Afghanistan, for example, you have more military contractors there than you have U.S. soldiers. This isn't. Carolyn mentioned Dwight D. Eisenhower.
Right.
There's also Major General Smedley Butler, the most decorated Marine in history.
Who said war is a racket?
He said war is a racket.
Now, do you not want to cut the defense budget? Hang on, because you think we are in danger, or because you think it'll stimulate the economy?
Both. I mean, listen, we're at war, right? First off, we're at war. Remember that.
Well, we're winding down one of them. The president's going to leave 50,000 troops there, and he says we're going to be out of the other one in a year.
Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? So we're at war still. That's number one. Number two, we have a very, very, very tenuous recovery. I wouldn't even call it a recovery now. We may be slipping back negative.
Do you really think that by spending money on tanks and bullets that we destroy, we stimulate the economy?
There are jobs associated with this, and as you said, in Virginia and where else, and where else they're cutting. And by the way, think about it, 2%. If it doesn't mean anything, why do it? And by the way, I don't see Carolyn or anybody else talking about cutting other parts of the budget.
Carolyn, are you the defender of the free market? And Charlie is saying we need to spend money because on war because it stimulates the economy. War doesn't stimulate; it destroys.
Judge, I'm certainly not defending an unfettered free market economy. We've never had one of those.
Wait, was that a real question?
Well, it was a real question. Does war stimulate the economy?
Not these wars. These wars are stimulating, as I said, a small group of military contractors who in our lifetime would have ever believed what's going on now with this. No, this war is draining the economy. It's perfect empire decline. Drain the economy as the foreign...
The war on terror is draining the economy.
Involved
Charlie,
in foreign...
let's see if I get this
Charlie,
right.
I didn't interrupt you. The war on... What we're doing now is we're in foreign entanglements at a time when you have to rebuild the country. Put that money to use in this country,
Charlie, we got about,
and I'm in favor of it.
Charlie, we got about 20 seconds
that,
before the break, and then we'll be back. Would the war be as popular if it weren't paid for on a credit card, if it had been pay as you go?
All wars are paid for on a credit card because when you fight a war, when you win the war on terror, you take out a mortgage because it benefits future generations.
All right. Heldman, Gasparino, Celente, stay with us. We spoke earlier about that new $26 billion bailout to the states. Congress claims it's paid for. Our freedom fighters
But we can't stand by and do nothing while pink slips are given to the men and women who educate our children or keep our communities safe.
Today's $26 billion jobs bill was sold to America as being fully paid for. What they failed to say is it's paid for by promising to cut spending on things like food stamps years from now. Does anyone really think that's going to happen, or does this bill just dig our deficit hole even deeper? To our freedom fighters, Carol, in 4 years from now, they're going to say food stamps have to go to pay for the money that we spent in 2010. Do you believe that?
Well, unfortunately, I'm cynical. I know how government works, and that's not the case. In 4 years, we won't remember that we've spent this money, unfortunately, and that goes for both Republicans and Democrats. And it's a function of our rapid electoral political system where it takes tons of money to run. We're always campaigning, and we're always making promises that we can't keep. And unfortunately, I think this is one.
The president, we just heard him, said he was concerned about jobs for teachers. Well, that's not in the Constitution. And about public safety. I guess he means jobs for cops. That's not in the Constitution. Let me ask you. Should we borrow $26 billion and give it to these public sector unions?
Just like I'm not, I don't think we should be cutting $20 billion out of the defense budget. I wouldn't necessarily care about this except for one thing.
What?
They spent $800 billion on a stimulus package that was supposed to, that went into saving teachers' jobs. Most of that money that they sold, those bonds, that $800 billion in bonds that they sold back in, I guess, the early 2009, that was basically a transfer of that money to the states so they could keep teachers employed. And that, we're double dipping, and that's wasteful.
The federal government borrows money or prints money, gives it to the states, and tells them how to spend it. Who knows better how to spend money, the locals or the feds? Jerry, question 2, do these stimuluses ever work?
Let's go for the question 2. The stimuluses haven't worked. The proof is in the unemployment. And all of a sudden now we're hearing from the Federal Reserve that, hey, things aren't as good as we predicted. And we said this was going to happen. The Great Depression is on the way. And secondly, this is nothing more than a campaign stunt. Look who Obama's support is. It's the teachers, it's the unions. And are they going to cut back on food stamps in 2014? I've come up with a new name for food stamps. Recovery rations.
Recovery rations. Carolyn, is this a campaign stunt that the Democrats are using because they're doing so poorly in the polls and they're in danger of losing the House of Representatives and the huge majority they have in the Senate this fall?
Of course, Judge, but I think I might be the only one on the panel who's actually in favor of it. I know that we're not going to be paying for it the way we say we will, but I am very much in favor of this stopgap measure to save 300,000 jobs.
But Carolyn, isn't it really duplicitous to say that we need to help teachers now when that's all we've been doing? The $800 billion that we spent 2 years ago on stimulus, which didn't work, it was supposed to go to shovel-ready projects, was literally a transfer to the states. They did not use it to build projects. They used it to keep the unions employed, the teachers, the paper pushers in Albany and Sacramento. So why do they get 2 bites at the apple?
Go ahead, Carolyn. You want to answer that?
Sure. Well, Charlie, I think that this is very clearly directed with strings attached to jobs. And so in that sense, I think this was done right. And
so was the other.
Jerry, the government...
The other was too. It was a transfer to the states so they could keep the bureaucrats employed.
The government can't borrow and spend and stimulate. It can't get us out of a problem caused by too much borrowing and spending with more borrowing and spending.
It's like you having a second mortgage and taking out a third. That's going to help. And let's look at the giving the money to the teachers. Oh, they're doing a great job. You want to talk about a bureaucracy. What is the United States now? We used to be #1 in the amount of kids graduating college. Now we're down to number 12. It's a number 12.